Abadox, the Inner War. Your home planet of Abadox has been swallowed whole by the deadliest menace in space. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Guys, this game goes hard. In more ways than one, really.
Oh?
Well, think about it. You're going inside a planet, which happens to also be an alien, because the alien is like either... It's unclear to me if he swallowed or just like parasitically took it over. But like, that's pretty hard in itself. The game is pretty freaking hard on like a difficulty level. But the box art has like Blood and Milton Bradley together. I don't recall like Blood in the Game of Life or Battleship or any of the other stuff they work on. All the creatures are pretty gruesome. What do you got?
Yeah, that was like my first observation because, you know, I've been going through these games without reading the manual to the positives and negatives that may happen. And the first thing I noticed was this pretty metal title screen with blood on the title Abadox. And then, Milton Bradley right under it. I was, I had that same cognitive dissonance that I guess you guys must have had too.
I actually did not really look at the cover art. I'm looking it up right now. But I do agree that the rest of it has like a pretty like gnarly design. Deliberate.
Gnarly.
Yeah, gnarly's a good word. Tubular also a good word. I think I heard that.
No. This is not tubular.
No, it is kind of. You're going inside the intestines.
Like literally.
It's literally tubes. You're going inside these tubes. It's very narrow, the game.
It's not the spirit of the phrase, but I understand.
Sure. The least hard thing in this game, by things that go hard, not difficulty, the least hard thing in this game is the player character. It's like a little pipsqueak. I was expecting like a Sylvester Stallone style character, or maybe a Jan Michael Vincent, something like that.
Especially with the intro that he gets. Like, you're in a mech suit, you're flying, you got a big gun, and then you're very, very fragile.
You're
like
so
a
tiny.
Little baby.
I mean, I think he looks pretty badass. He's just small because you're like surrounded by this giant threat everywhere. But yeah, he is in like an Iron Man suit sort of thing, like with a giant like rifle gun or whatever. And yes, he's very fragile, but like as you power up, he gets less fragile.
Yeah, but does it really look like that on the in-game? I agree with you. The box art makes him look tough. Maybe like, I don't remember.
He's like a chibi in-game.
Yeah, there's just something missing.
I guess he is chibi, but like in game, I look at him and I'm like, that's a guy in like crazy decked out armor, like futuristic armor. But yes, it is not like, maybe it's not. Yeah, like the design is not like as edgy.
In game, it looks like a baby on one of those swings that's designed for babies, and his legs are just dangling out.
I don't see it, but I kind of get it.
I see dangling legs. I don't see the
dangling
the
legs for sure.
In the game, it's the year 5012. We'll stop there because I'm going to make many stops in the plot, but it's the year 5012. Do you think like when people do stuff like that, it's because they want to make sure that nobody ever says like, oh, well, we passed that and it didn't happen? Like, this was never going to happen, so I guess it doesn't matter, right?
No. If that was the problem, then he could have done like 3012 or even like 2090. Like, you don't need to go that far ahead, you know?
Yeah, but maybe, if you're expecting this to be a timeless classic, you want as much time in between as possible. But that's I also true. Feel like if like this came out in 1990, it wouldn't like, there is a level of like, for believability, you can't be like, the year is 1993.
That's true.
No, that's totally true. Close. But at the same time, like, when you're going that far up in years, like, I've never seen anybody use the year 10,000, but 5,000 is pretty high up. Why do you need the 12? Is that like to make it more realistic then on top of the outlandishness?
What are the odds it happens right on? Yeah.
I have a quick question that might be a little off topic for you guys.
Sure.
Do you think any art that is, recent will be remembered in the year 5012?
No video game. Not a single video game.
Really?
Okay.
Well, it depends on the state of the world. I mean, we uncover shit from thousands of years ago.
I think it just depends on the state. Like maybe in Utah.
No, right. Well, because everything will be totally like isolated. There'll be no contact between states.
True.
I guess I shouldn't say no video game though. Like there will be one, right? Like
Pong.
whatever, yeah, exactly. Whatever we agree upon is first, which isn't Pong, but like we seem to all agree that Pong is first. So yeah, I agree with that. Like the same way that like most movies won't be remembered by 5012. Like, look, No Country for Old Men is a great movie. No one's gonna be talking about it in 5012.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so back to the plot. We're going to try to get a little bit further on the sentence here. In the year 5012, the planet Abadox, and I'm going to stop there, okay? Because Abadox doesn't really sound... It sounds more like the planet Eater, not the name of the planet. It sounds like a virus, right? Like, who names their planet Abadox?
It doesn't sound like either of those things. It sounds like a toilet cleaner.
There you go.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like there's bleach in it.
Yeah.
What was that like cookie that wasn't Oreo but like was the same as Oreo?
Hydrox.
Yeah, right.
Oh
like,
yeah. I saw
same
that on
problem.
Reddit recently too.
Yeah, we all saw it.
It came before Oreos. So maybe Abadox came before Earth, and then everyone just liked Earth better.
That's an idea.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also Abadox. Just remember that like the alien organism that eats the planet is known as Parasitis, which could also, convincing, but could have also been the disease that the planet Abadox had. Yeah, exactly. Parasitis doesn't sound quite like a enemy name either.
Yeah, like I feel like I've had parasitis. Well, maybe not me, but one of my friends that you wouldn't know.
Right. Different high school.
Yeah.
All right, back to the plot. In the year 5012, the planet Abadox is eaten by a giant alien organism known as Parasitis. Having consumed Abadox, the alien takes the form of the planet. Okay, now that's confusing. It takes the form of the planet, like in the sense of it has become the planet, has swallowed the planet whole and now looks like the planet, or ate the whole planet and as a result is now like mutating into the planet again.
I like to think of it as... Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I would have thought that it's like the planet now is consumed from the inside by Parasitis. Like Parasitis is one with the planet. But that's just what I took out of it.
I think like it, let's say Parasitis came to America. I'm sorry, Earth. And
what's the difference?
Exactly. So it swallows Earth whole. So what you'd see is like you'd see the outlines of the continents, but it would be as if like you wrapped some leather around it, so you'd like see the raised continents, but it would be just like the texture of the skin of Parasitis.
Got it. So it wouldn't be like that thing that happened in season 6 of Rick and Morty where like the whole planet got like, what was that, Joe? They got murfed or something, like, and then
they got murked.
No, it's like, that smiley face alien thing. Like if it sucks onto one thing, then it takes over another thing, and eventually like the continents were like merging into one, and then like from there the planet became the object. Bad example because I can't remember what it was called, but I don't think that would actually matter. I don't think it would matter if you knew the name because the concept is the same. So
yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so we're getting cleared up on a lot of these things. I feel like I'm really starting to understand the plot because now the alien Parasitis has taken form of the planet and seeks to devour other planets. A very like Galactus style thing. It's like you can't have enough of just eating one planet. That's my thing now. I eat all planets. Before that, it was just eating like asteroids. Then it had its first planet, and it was like, holy shit! Like,
I think that raises another question. Like, if it's taken the form of a planet, why is it now eating other planets? I can't visualize a planet eating another planet.
Wouldn't weird stuff start happening to like gravity as it moved towards the other planet?
Yeah, I feel like it would get crushed.
It's not like there are like people living on it, right? It's all these like alien parasite things now. So maybe they are equipped for greater gravity.
Like the planet itself?
I guess I'm no, the like all these little things that are attacking you.
Oh, okay.
Like, but I guess now what I'm confused about is like, so are you just trying to save other planets, not your home planet? Your home planet is doomed?
Yeah, I don't think you can save Abadox.
Interesting. That's actually kind of an interesting like difference from like most of these games where it's like, look, this is hopeless, but you can at least stop this from happening to other planets.
And then you can go live on one of those other planets.
That's true.
Is that kind of like the plot of Titan AE? I can't quite remember. Remember that game, that movie?
I remember the movie. I never saw it, though.
Okay, all right. Maybe it's not.
With Parasitis' goal to devour other planets, the galactic military launches an attack. But it is destroyed by Parasitis. That's interesting. Like, you're late to that part of the story. Like, before the game has even begun, you are the last hope. The entire galactic military has been wiped out.
That implies a lot of things have happened. Like, we're under a one galactic government.
It's the year 5012. It's not that unrealistic.
Yeah. It just keeps throwing more information about the world at me in this, like, one paragraph.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, so I guess you're not, like, just, like, selflessly being like, oh, I'll go save other planets. Like, you still live within the, like, the government of this galaxy.
You signed a contract.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have to.
And so, look, this plot is pretty damn good. It's got a lot to dissect. Like, I could see Ridley Scott making a movie like this. Like, I'm all on board. And then it's about to jump the shark violently with this next line, okay? The galactic military launches an attack, but it is destroyed by Parasitis, who goes on to devour the hospital ship carrying Princess Maria. Now, we need to unpack two things. What's a hospital ship? And why is Princess Maria inside that hospital ship? And isn't Princess Maria now dead if the hospital ship was eaten alive by the planet?
Well, as we can see here, it is capable of swallowing things whole, so it's not, a total, like, it's like that whale story and the
Pinocchio, Jonah.
Pinocchio. It's like Pinocchio. Like, he may still be in there, or the whole hospital ship may still be in there for all we know. It's a planet. So, not all hope is lost. I think it's strange that it would go from priority eat planet to priority eat very small ship in comparison. Like, I would want to eat something bigger.
Yeah, and so is it not explained why she's on the hospital ship? Was that just to, like, inject a little more drama in it? Like, and she was sick. So
I don't think it's explained who she is.
It's not explained who she is. Like, is there one princess that rules the entire galactic military, or is she just like one of many princesses?
Maybe it's like a Naboo situation where, like, she's the princess of Abadox, but, she's just a senator. I don't know.
Yeah, but Abadox has been taken over by Parasitis, so what good is she anymore? In fact, if she doesn't even have land to claim as her own anymore, is she really a princess of anything?
Well, now we're just talking about the idea of sovereignty, and I think that's outside the scope of this podcast.
Understood. All right, so you play as...
We just got outside the scope of this podcast right now.
You play as Second Lieutenant Nazal, which, again, weird name, but he looks like it. I suppose the little pipsqueak guy looks like a Nazal. Second Lieutenant Nazal, the only surviving fighter of the Galactic Fleet. The math checks out there because the rest of them were all destroyed. You will attempt to enter Parasitis' body, another fancy way of saying Abadox, and rescue Princess Maria before it is too late. My question, final question, and then I'll read the whole freaking paragraph back to you. Why did they feel the need to rescue a princess on top of everything? Like, were the stakes not high enough that, like, your entire planet has been consumed by an alien organism that now seeks to eat other planets? Like, no, it's just not big enough in scope. Like, throw in Princess Peach as well.
Well, you need to have the romance. Like, because I think it's unsaid, but Nazal has unrequited feelings with, what's her name again? Maria. Toadstool. I think that might add a little bit to the stakes. Would you save the world if you didn't, like, get like a little peck on the cheek at the end?
Well, you're not saving the world anyways. So they're like, the stakes are like saving other worlds. Where it's like,
saving the
galaxy. I care about the princess.
Yeah, we don't know if you can like develop a loving relationship with the other life forms that are in these other planets that you're saving. So yeah, you probably want to protect Princess Maria, your last chance at having any kind of meaningful relationship with your own kind.
What's the main character's name again?
Nazal.
I said nasal on purpose to make
or
him
nasal.
sound, to make him. No, I think you're right, Nazal. But I was trying to make him sound even weaker because he looks weak, and he is weak.
It just sounds like Nazal is like out of like a science fiction thing. It just sounds like a futuristic name to me. Maria does not. Maria does not sound like your 5012 name. So I wonder if they're really just like maybe someone thought like, oh, people today in 1990 aren't going to be able to relate to this spaceman. We need to give them a love interest who just sounds like a contemporary person.
You're probably right, but I think they could have just done the half measure and called her like Mariax. Mariax sounds like a split between the two.
You know, they did the same thing in Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, where Shadow the Hedgehog is in love with Maria. And he wants to save Maria, so he has to team up with Sonic the Hedgehog in order to save Maria.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe it's just an all West Side Story thing.
Maria is a human. Thank you for checking in on that.
They definitely keep doing that, and it makes me feel very strange about Sonic.
Can you guys think of any other games where you fight from inside a monster?
Yeah, haven't we had like several shmups? I mean, to answer your question, no, I can't think of any. But haven't we had multiple shmups where you fight inside like an organic thing?
Life Force comes to mind. The final stage of Life Force, you actually have to go inside, which is cool.
It's a trope as like a gimmick level, or not like a gimmick, but it's definitely a theme that will show up in a game, but never the focal point of like the aesthetic of a game. Like I was very surprised by the visual design of this game.
Yeah, we should probably talk about that too, because all of the creatures in the game, and I'm using them creatures instead of enemies, they're all pretty like gruesome by 8-bit pixel standards. Like there's, where you would usually get in a Gradius style game, like similar style spaceships flying at you that you have to shoot down. Instead, you get flying eyeballs. Like that's the first thing you see on the screen. You're like, whoa, this is pretty heavy. Yeah,
it's got some like body horror vibes. Like I kept thinking of Existenz. I don't know if you guys saw that movie. It was like a Cronenberg movie, but there was this piece of electronics that it was like a virtual reality video game, but it got like way too organic, and there was a lot of weird like merging of body and technology, and it was super gruesome.
Oh, that's definitely a Cronenberg thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything in this, like even the walls and like the surroundings is all very organic and it feels very squishy, to the point where like, I mean, there's a level that looks to me like you're just flying through a bunch of like intestines. And then there are like parts where you have like this fleshy membrane are the walls, and like suddenly that membrane turns into these like grotesque hands that come out and grab at you, and like it's definitely like trying to emulate this. Yeah, I mean Cronenberg is a good thought, but yeah, it's like trying to do like this body horror feel to it.
Yeah, and there's something about like NES graphics at the time were the best graphics that you had outside of like the arcades and stuff. So for people like, it could have seemed very real or whatever, in the same way that like now I make fun of, N64 and PS1 graphics. But when I was a kid, the piano with teeth in Super Mario 64 like scared the shit out of me, like legitimately terrified me. I feel like the first boss in this game is something that a young me would have like shut the game off in fear of, because I'm not quite sure what happened to that cow. I'm assuming it's a cow, but it's also like a skeleton cow with its brain still like intact to it. And
I saw it more of like a horse dog.
okay.
I thought it was a wolf. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I see wolf more than any of these, but it also looks like there's like something else attached to it. Like it has like another, it has a third eye like leached onto it, so it's like the skeleton of a wolf, but then like the parasitis has like leached itself onto it and is just like it's the actual brains, and the skeleton is just like being reanimated by the parasite.
Well, if you want to talk about like what really like one like bosses that are freaky, a few bosses later, I think it's like I mean, there's a lot of like mini bosses and stuff too, so I don't know which one you'd consider it, but it's like maybe stage 5 or something. There's that like thing that it's like a giant humanoid red gross man who out of his chest is an eyeball, and like his head curves around to the top of the screen. He's looking down on you as you're like fighting it. Like it's hard to describe, but that to me was like the most like unsettling boss.
Yeah, there's those kinds of bosses, and then at some point you get like a fish with a helmet, which is a little less scary, but overall like very unique boss designs.
Yeah, even the ones that are following the the Gradius like shoot the core style, where it's like there's an eyeball that you just have to keep hitting as the weak point. That's like, yeah, there's a gigantic eyeball and it's attached to a person's chest or whatever. It's like why'd you have to go the extra distance? Like just give me the eyeball. Like that's scary enough to shoot at. Now you're like it's coming out of somebody's chest. Like that's insane.
And I think one that I think we're talking about a different one. It's in one of the vertical levels, where you're going through the intestine sort of feeling area, and then you end up getting split into two paths, and it seems like a separate objects, but it's still a part of the background, and you see like teeth kind of coming out and blocking your way. Is like a bit of a timing mini game there, and then at the end you see this weird parasite looking thing. So it just looks like a typical parasite that you might have if you ate some 8-year-old egg or something. And that was just the fact that it really committed to it, and not so much like, oh, how fucked up can we try and look? And it looked a little bit more like something that could exist. That one was pretty intense.
Yeah, that's a really cool one because it's all, like you were saying, like it's not revealed to be the boss when you're going down the corridors. So then you realize like the scale of the enemy too, like the size of it. And granted, you don't have to take it all down or anything. It didn't start moving. You just shoot the end point. But like, I really appreciate just not even the commitment to the design or anything, but like, we don't see this even in like the sci-fi futuristic games that we get, like that are Gradius spin-offs otherwise. Like this commits completely to the idea of gross body horror, you're inside of a living planet thing in a way that also like completely works for shmups. Like everything that shoots projectiles and whether they're attached to the environment or as individual enemies, like there's nothing that shows up here that's too weird other than those like pterodactyls at the beginning. I'm not sure what the point of them was, but everything else fits right in.
Going a little bit into the actual gameplay design, I really appreciated how, you've got a unique perspective here, because yes, it's one of those shmups that'll change between vertical and horizontal, but the vertical, it's going down, and that's something that we haven't seen before. And in any other context, it'd be like, why did they do this? Like, there are conventions for a reason, but then you realize like what it's doing, and it has that commitment to the aesthetic that you would be going down if you're going through the like digestive system of a planet-sized disgusting parasite. So I really appreciated that aspect of the design.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was intentional, but to that same point, like going top down in a shmup like this just feels like, at least to us, because we've played so many other shmups and just games in general, it feels a little off. It feels like unsettling. Like, I think it helps add to that feel of like unpredictability or like something's wrong.
Well, the whole game too isn't one that lets you explore much. Not that the rails move fast or anything. It is a shmup on rails, so you're waiting for the scrolling to happen. But it's just that the space that they allot for you isn't very much, and if anything, it just continues to get like tighter and tighter the further you go into the levels, and so that kind of creates both a claustrophobic feeling of like no turning back, but also from a gameplay stand of view, there's like, it's really interesting how in other games like platformers, for instance, sometimes we complain about like how closed in the levels are and the lack of freedom in the jump and stuff like that. Here, my initial thought might have been to say like, oh, it's really like weird that they don't let you roam around this alien creature, but it works, and it also doesn't make the game significantly more challenging by closing you in. If anything, you have to play those tight corners like appropriately. So those teeth that keep spawning out, they look like fangs. That's very interesting. That it's just a timing thing. It doesn't make the game necessarily any harder. You just wait to go around them and everything, but you're kind of locked off, and you're dealing with only like a particular enemy at that point. There's not like an enemy overload at any particular instance. It's just that most of the enemies require some form of thought. You can't just dodge the bullets.
This is a very difficult game. How cramped it gets is definitely a part of it, though I would say that it's not the most difficult aspect of it. But this is a game that, at least thematically, like, it can get away with that. If it were any other, like, boilerplate shmup game, I might say like, hey, that's interesting that they at least did something different. But that's sort of like a rule you don't break. Like, give the player space to move around if this is going to be a bullet hell. But because of the theme and the context, it does make sense. But I will say that those sort of timing navigational challenges are kind of the least of your concerns when it comes to the difficulty of this game.
Yeah, I think it does play into the like how you approach the game in general, because for me, a lot of times in a shmup, just being not particularly great at them, I like my method or my strategy will be like to try and get past a lot of enemies, because I know I'm not gonna be able to like dodge their fire for long or take them all out. And so I was kind of trying to stay close to the front of the screen without getting surprised by things that I can't see. But I did over time kind of realize like this game really felt to me like it was encouraging me to hang back and like manage what's ahead of me, because you don't have a lot of space to move. So like when you go forward and there's a bunch of like quote unquote turrets or whatever you'd call the equivalent, the organic equivalent of these turrets around, like you're going to get trapped in just like a web of projectiles that you can't like escape from. So like I actually found over time I started using these like obstacles like those teeth coming out or like other things that were blocking my way for a moment, like as a reminder to like, okay, I can hang back here and shoot things ahead, while I'm like kind of both waiting for my opportunity to move as well as like making it safer to move. So I don't know, it felt like a lot of other shmups have like encouraged me just being like as aggressive and twitchy as possible, whereas this kind of like made me like, for the most as you can in a shmup that is auto scrolling, it made me want to like sit back and think.
Yeah, I think the worst part of the game in terms of the claustrophobic tight spaces is that it does kind of break that rule at times with the design where certain things that stand in your way are designed to be shot at in order to clear them out. You're like shooting out the intestines and then it creates a hole that you go through. And then there are other design elements in this game that are designed to be like, oh no, that's in the foreground, and you go through them, and you might not know that the first time you play through this, and so you're shooting at it, waiting for it to destroy, and most likely the sign would come up immediately that your bullets are going through it, so you too can also go through it. But in a game where like everything counts, it is kind of weird that they set it up two different ways without having two different kinds of looks. There's obviously no like way to do a transparency with the foreground and the background.
Yeah, there were a couple times where those things you're talking about literally were the exact same like tile set as the walls. So it was like, okay, this looks like more wall, but it's just not.
One other last thing on the navigation challenges. It also, and again, I don't know how intentional this was, or if this was just like, oh, most shmups have speed upgrades, but if you get too many of those, you're probably just gonna run wild and very poorly perform them. You end up getting super twitchy if you get too many speed upgrades, and you just run right into the wall.
Yeah, it's funny with any shmup that gets to that level where you're trying to now avoid power-ups. I definitely know what you're talking about, Sean. I tried to avoid anything beyond 2 speed power-ups because I was most likely just going to twitch my way into a wall on accident. But in other shmups, that's also kind of a thing where, if you collect one kind of power-up, if you collect a different kind of power-up, now you lost the old power-up, and so you have to dodge those sometimes too, and I don't like that. And this game doesn't make that mistake where, you can only have one type of power-up. Like, you can collect all of the types of power-ups. And I do think that the game does a good job of, at least while you retain all your power-ups, the thing before you die, while you have them all, it does a good job of making you feel really strong and like you can take care of what's in front of you because you're getting all different kinds of projectiles and homing missiles and shields and it's not just like one of each too. Like you're moving along. It's just the issue is, as you mentioned, because the game is so hard, it's a one-hit kill. You lose all your power-ups and you restart from a checkpoint. You don't even just like immediately spawn back in with your ship. So there's a lot to ask. Yeah.
While there are several different kinds of power-ups that can stack, your base fire can get overwritten, so I was also avoiding certain... Those are like the different shaped pickups. I know a lot of them have just a letter on them, like we're picking up the bombs, or not bombs. The things that orbit you are their own thing, and then there's a missile category, and then there's the speed ones, and then there's your base fire, which can be any number of different spreads or projectile shapes, and those can mess you up if you found one that you really jive with, and you go back to just a straight shot, which can really mess with you.
Yeah, I noticed that too. There's one I particularly liked was just like a giant bubble, and every time I would lose that, I would be a little disappointed.
Yeah. But as hard as the game is, especially with the reset of power-ups, which I'm sure we'll get into, which we have talked about in other shmups too, there is an interesting continue forever standpoint that the game takes as well, where no matter how many game overs you do get to just continue from at least the stage that you were on, not from the checkpoint, but from the stage you were on. So there is a way to, if you can figure out a way to rebuild up your power-ups and learn the level properly, you at least don't have to start over from level 1. A nice consolation prize, if you will, because it is very hard when you lose all your power-ups to gain them back. So we're dealing in theoreticals here, but I do think that the continue from the start of the stage you died in makes more sense from a player progression standpoint than starting all the way over.
Yeah, I mean, losing your power-ups is punishment enough. I in my opinion, where like I feel like a lot of games will tend to overdo it. Be like, yeah, you lose your power-ups, and then if you die 3 times, you start the whole game over. I think that at this day and age, I feel like that just encourages people to be like, okay, I'm done with this game.
Going inside of a body, of any kind of body, this being an alien body, like there could have been another way to play this where this game is more like silly and cute and all that, being like playful to the idea of like now you're in this organ, or now you're in this. It's like in
like
this
the Magic
game,
School Bus.
Yeah, exactly. Or that episode of the Rugrats where they go inside Chucky.
Yeah.
The watermelon seed. The idea here, though, I guess what I'm saying is like it does take a turn as it should, where like all of a sudden now there's like computer components and other aliens with guns and stuff. Like towards the end of the game, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm saying like it could have gone either way, and I'm just more interested on like from a going inside the body POV. Where do you guys stand on that?
Where do I stand
I don't
on
understand
the fact that there's like guns in the body?
No, or like that they didn't commit completely to the navigating inside of a body, and instead then it becomes more like this sci-fi technology, like you're fighting a robot, and then there's like a whole like it loses the whole like guts and intestinal thing, and starts becoming more like it starts to look at least a little bit more like a traditional sci-fi game where you're like inside another spaceship.
Well, yeah, I guess I will grant that it definitely isn't just intestines the whole time, but there is always kind of a dark aspect to whatever situation you're in, and you can like even the ones that sort of get away from that visceral feel are still like, oh, that could be bone, and it still looks like there's just weird worms everywhere. It's always disgusting, unless you are in a section that has more technology, but I still think that sort of fits with the aesthetic because, Star Trek, Borg kind of thing. Like, I think that they committed as much as they should have.
Yeah, I'm not against it. I think that it's like, it leads to like interesting thoughts of like, okay, so like this organic thing that, something or someone is building onto it, or maybe it's capable of technology, or it's merged with some sort of technology or whatever. The part that I didn't get very far in because I did not beat this game, but the part that I'm like watching right now is definitely like tech. There's like laser beams and like light bulbs and things like that. And I think that that's interesting. Maybe they just thought that the purely organic stuff would get stale, or like they kind of started out of the gate with this dark, purely organic, like gross level of like design. So maybe they're like, well, where do we go? Like, what's the next thing that's like the final thing? We like got to add something new. So tech combined with the grossness is where it ends up.
And at the very end of the game, another thing that is similar to Life Force is that after you've defeated the final boss, you have to escape from it, and that becomes a twitch reflex, like make sure that you don't hit any of these walls that are just randomly placed all over the place, and squeeze through these little hallways before the exit, and it goes on for a pretty long time. I'm just not sure like how much of that, like, is that a good ending for a shmup where the whole point of the game otherwise was to, as they say, shoot up all the enemies and take down all the bosses? Is it weird that the final challenge is just this like fast reflexes, like the screen is scrolling faster than it ever did during the regular game, and one bad movement will destroy you? Like, it seems misplaced.
I think it works. I mean, I didn't get to this point because, again, the game is very difficult. But in terms of a sort of change in the gameplay loop to hammer home that this is the close, this is the climax, this is the great escape, I think it works. I haven't experienced it, but in theory...
I guess I can see that, like, for that to be the, like, final challenge without that ever being, like, a smaller version of the challenge throughout the game. Like, it's not like the game isn't giving you, like, okay, now use what we taught you. It's like, now learn this new thing. So to that point, I kind of understand, like, if people would complain about that. Like, I don't know, maybe if there were other times where you had to dodge things, like, I know you have to do that the whole game, but, like, not at this speed and not, like, strictly, like, this is clearly an obstacle course and not, like, fight enemies anymore. And, like, there was no other part of the game that was like that. So it feels a little like, wait, where the heck did this come from? But I'm kind of neutral on it.
Just to defend it one last time, like, okay, if you're going to make me get eaten at the beginning of the game, I'm sure as hell going to expect you to poop me out. So that's where I feel, and I think thematically they kept their promise.
I see both sides, and I understand, that, like, it spices it up, but also, like, makes sense from a story POV. I guess I just wonder about, like, the punishing nature of the game, and then to change what the game was and make it very punishing at the very end. Like, I'm sure if you were able to make it this far, you're probably pretty good at this, but you might not. It reminds me of other NES games where, if you don't know the level inside and out yet, you might just not be able to react fast enough to know that, like, okay, yeah, so this is the center gate, and then this is the top left gate. Like, some people just, like, memorize that stuff years later. I don't know if you can have that here, and so, like, when you die, you go back to the checkpoint, sure, but, like, if you die 3 times, then you have to go back to the beginning of that level and fight the final boss all over again, except for without those precious power-ups. Feels a little cruel. But it's a cruel game, so let's talk maybe a little bit more about the difficulty. Maybe on, like, a general scale, like, just for shmups in general. Well,
actually,
yeah, go ahead.
I do have one, before we, like, go too far past, I do want to, like, jump back to the difficulty of the boss battles specifically, too.
Yeah.
Because I thought the boss battles were well designed and difficult, except for one major flaw that I found in most of them, and I think I got, like, a little more than halfway through the game, so maybe they get better. But almost every boss I beat was by finding a pretty obvious spot that I wouldn't get hit and just standing there and shooting, like, and not moving. Because
I did find at least one of those, yeah.
Yeah, the patterns for these, it's not like other patterns where it's like, oh, they're going to shoot this time, and then they're going to shoot 3, and then they're going to shoot 5, but it's always moving and everything's changing. It's like they're going to shoot, 20 bullets right here while they're shooting 5 bullets right here and 3 things right here, and they're going to do that over and over again. I'm like, okay, well, if I just stand in the spot that I can see none of those bullets are hitting, it'll never change. There were some exceptions. There were a couple bosses that then started moving, and then I had to, like, actually beat them legitimately. But most of the time I was beating these bosses by, like, finding the spot where, and it wasn't, like, didn't even feel like a cheese spot like a lot of other things where it's like you wouldn't know this unless, like, you read some FAQ or something. Like, this is just like, oh, I can kind of see it. I can kind of see that, like, there's no bullets going here, so I can just sit here and just shoot forever.
Joe, that's just a pro gamer moment.
What's that?
That's just a pro gamer moment, man.
I guess so.
No, I agree. It is weird.
I was a little upset about that, though. I was a little, like, I mean, I was happy about it at the time because I was like, oh, great, I can beat this. But now looking back at it, I'm like, I don't feel like I really had I really beat those levels.
I mean, we have an essential game that does the exact same thing. Granted, that's like one of many levels.
And are you talking about Gradius?
Yeah.
But isn't that's also like, I feel like, I can't remember, but I feel like that's like something that, like, you would have heard about and probably not something you would notice on your own, like on a first playthrough, right?
Maybe.
Like, it's not like really obvious.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Well, I don't know if it's kind of obvious if, like you're saying, like, if you just look at the way that the volcanoes shoot out, you might say, like, oh, I just noticed that if I hang out right here, they never reach me. It's not like it's a secret, like, oh, it looks like it hits you, but the hitbox doesn't get detected.
Right, I'd have to see it again, but yeah, I guess that's a good point.
But it's also one level. It's not all of them.
Yeah,
and so I think, I'm of two minds with this one, but I agree. Like, for a game that is so difficult, or at least punishing in the sense of how it's just one hit kills and it doesn't exactly hold your hand through the game, it is a little strange that they would have exploits like that. That said, I'm happy to experience them and to be able to beat these bosses and continue to move on, because it is a joy to continue along in this game. And I would have hated to like have bosses that were just way too hard that I die on and then I have to restart and hope that I can get past them. Like maybe it's like a little bit of that, but in my older age, like I'd rather not spend a ton of hours on the first level of a game. That's kind of past those points.
Yeah, punishing is definitely a word I would use to describe this game, but sort of looking back on it now, I realize how much that they actually do kind of give you a break in some ways. Like, there's the continue mechanic, but there's also the like little satellites that you get, which they're not 100%, but they do kind of provide you some cover when you're in the really bullet hell moments, and it's still an upgrade that you have to pick up, and it doesn't change the fact that you don't have any when after you die. But if you're in like a tight spot and you have kind of gotten on a bit of a streak, like you will likely at least have one of these little orbiting things, and that should help you out a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those games that we talk about where like that we've had before, where these power-ups make a huge difference. Those orbiting those satellites really helped me. I mean, sometimes I felt like I could even use them deliberately, like I could kind of run them into things that were coming at me and stuff. And then all the other power-ups you get, it's one of those games where the more you power up, the more like kind of like unstoppable you feel for a little bit until you get hit, and then it is like really devastating to lose those power-ups. And this one I felt that even more. Like, I actually don't think this is like super, super difficult when when you're fully powered up. It's just the problem is that like it's hard to get there and it's hard to stay there for like really long. Like you're really, really good, but then you get like so nervous, like I cannot lose these power-ups because then I'm dead like every time. So it's hard to get there, but once you're there, it's like you're so attached to it because it makes me even more
psychological
nervous.
Thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the possibility that it also feels so good to be fully powered that you could chase that feeling after a death and want to continue to play. It doesn't have to be so soul crushing to be like, well, I could never come back from that. The unlimited continues does make it possible to persevere and play on and learn the levels.
Yeah, and one other aspect of the difficulty, I can't really tell if it was in like an overt design decision or if it was a side effect of technical limitations. But it always kind of it's always a variable in these shmups. How many projectiles can you have on the screen at once? Or how many times can you press the button and it shoots a new one? Because I know that like with spread weapons and like with all the other things that like the other like missiles, like you can have a lot of projectiles that you've shot on the screen. But in terms of bursts, like you pressing the button and then all of them happening, you can only have, I think, 2 or maybe even 1 with certain upgrades of these like bullets or bullet bursts on the screen at once. So like you can't like I would just spam, and that might contribute to why I wasn't that great at this game, but you're not going to get the fire rate that you're expecting. Do you guys kind of know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's all about fire rate too, because think about if you were able to sort of turbo it, right, and just constantly have a spread in front of you, It would tone down the difficulty considerably because you almost have like a wall of projectiles protecting you from the front on top of your shield balls. I don't know if we came up with an official name for these things. We keep saying different things.
I like shield balls.
Yeah, these shield balls around you. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Again, probably an intentional design decision, but it is something that once again makes the game a little bit harder. There's no sequel for Abadox, which is a little disappointing, but also I gave credit to Milton Bradley, but they just published this game. This game was developed by Natsume, who apparently make a ton of great NES games. So we'll... I'm looking at the list.
Is this our first Natsume?
It's not. At least I don't think it is. Let me check this out. No, it is. It is our first.
Oh.
It's our first Natsume. So we're gonna go on and play Power Blade, Dragon Fighter, which I thought we played, but that's Dragon Power, the Dragon Ball ripoff.
Oh yeah.
Really was Dragon Ball. They just removed that in our states. Scat, which sounds really strange.
Oh.
Special Cybernetic Attack Team. I'm sure that they knew what they were doing. Shadow of the Ninja. It just gets weird from here. The Jetsons. They made a Jetsons. Like the people who made Abadox made the Jetsons game. Like great. I look forward to it. Oh, you know what they made?
What?
You're not gonna believe this. They made Chaos World.
Oh.
That Nostalgia Bites game.
Yeah,
we enjoyed
I knew
that.
It rang a bell.
Yeah, we enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So there you go. Okay, if you want to hear more Natsume before those other episodes, check out patreon.com/nostalgia. $5 a month, you get the Nostalgia Bites episodes. And other than just Chaos World, you get access to all of them immediately. And you can cancel the following month after you download all the episodes. Like, I'm not going to check on you, but we'd love to have you. Anyway, that was my plug. Back to Natsume. Just wanted to throw out that, like, Milton Bradley, the makers of The Game of Life, were not, like, also the makers of Abadox, The Inner War. But would you play an Abadox-style board game?
I think maybe. I think, if you could probably sell me on any kind of board game if it's executed right,
Yeah, I think it would be cool. Like my gut, I'm going to immediately like these, like the games that are not like a Milton Bradley type game, but like a more a more grown up board game. But I do think it would be very funny to have like a Candyland sort of Abadox game where you're kind of riding the small intestine down like or like Chutes and Ladders, or maybe there's like a Trouble dice popper in the middle of it or something.
I would play any of those, yeah.
Abadox Twister.
Ooh.
What is the mat? What does the mat look like?
Yeah, I think you have to. It has to be like
it's a series of tubes.
The mat is like a cube that you go inside of, and you have to.
Would you use the Abadox licensed slip and slide?
Oh,
ooh.
Yeah, but it's it is a tube as well. Everything is a tube.
Everything.
Would you go to the Abadox licensed water park?
Absolutely.
Only if it's one tube.
It starts as one tube, but there are changing paths that you can go down.
Well, would you use Abadox style toothpaste?
Ooh.
In a tube?
I think, it sounds more like a toothpaste if you haven't paid attention to the...
Yeah, it does, actually.
If you're
like
just
a toothpaste,
tuning in...
like for like your grandparents or something. It's like a denture toothpaste.
Yeah.
Well, guys, would you vote for Abadox on the Essential Games list? I really want to put Abadox on the Essential Games list. And that's a spicy way to start a vote. But I kind of want to put Abadox on the Essential Games list the same way I want to put Monster Party on the Essential Games list. They're just games that I really enjoy. I don't know if they fit the criteria of what I've at least set up the Essential Games list to be. I don't think Monster Party was like another thing similar to Abadox where it was really committed to its theme and like the ground rules that it lays down and everything. Like, this game is complete. It is a complete game. It has tight controls. It's just really hard and frustrating, and I'm not sure, like, by the standard of 2023, it holds up that well. It's definitely like one of the best shmups on the NES, but I just don't feel like, even though I think it's one of the best games I've played on the NES, I don't think it's up there with the rest of the essential games list. And so I'm going to hold it off for right now, but maybe there's room for a conversation later, maybe along with Monster Party. Who knows? We just have to wait till 2026 for the next essential games list voting. If it doesn't get on here, of course. Joe, what do you have to say?
Well, I appreciate you saying that this game is complete, because that helps me articulate my point, because I particularly don't want to put this on the essential games list. And then when I kind of come up with that idea, I'm like, well, I have to defend that. And I really like don't have like a great defense for it, other than like, I think, because I do think this game is good. I do think this game is very polished, and I think that calling it complete kind of helps me, like, yeah, like that's what it is about this game that a lot of other games, sometimes shmups, don't do for me. We're like, yeah, this is a complete game. It feels like they did what they wanted to do, and there's a really cool aesthetic, and it plays pretty well. I mentioned a few complaints I had with like the boss battles and stuff like that, but to me, it just doesn't hold its head out above all these other games enough to make me think like, oh yeah, this one's gonna really stick with me for a long time. I think maybe even less than what you're saying, Mike. Like, for me, I just like it just doesn't grab me as much. Like, I appreciate that this is a good game, and I think it's a play it if you're into shmups. I don't think that it like sticks out to me as like, oh, this is a must play. So I'm going to say no.
So it can't be on the essential games list, but Sean, don't let that stop you. What do you say?
I'm gonna agree with Joe that this does not stand head and shoulders above many games that we've played on the NES, but it does stand head and shoulders above most of the shmups that we've played on the NES, and I think that's still saying something, because I think at least every episode that we're covering a shmup, one of us, whether it's Joe, me, or Mike, will make a comment about how, like, oh, it's just another shmup. They've got their own rubric. There's like, does it fit the AP style guide for shmups? What are the upgrades? Like, how does that gun shoot? Like, it's really just grading a test where everyone took the same test, and the answers are all either correct or incorrect. And it's either a spaceship or a World War II plane or a helicopter for some reason. And it just like, does this feel good to play? Everything else is just sort of taken for granted. And finally we get a game. We finally get a shmup that has its own feel to it and actually feels like its own idea. And the whole body horror thing, like, yeah, it's a little much, but at least it's not just Greenland on blue water with like some bombs that you drop. So if it's going into any essential list, it would be going into the essential shmups list. That said, this game is incredibly frustrating. I mean, we definitely talked about its difficulty, but we may have understated it. I even sort of gave it a pass on some things because it doesn't kick you back to the beginning of the game when you die, which is the least it could do. So I do really like this game for what it stands for, and all of the art and the ideas behind it. But as a game, I kind of agree with you guys. I don't think it deserves to be on the essential games list. But I do feel strongly about it.
Yeah, I think all three votes are totally valid. They're valid regardless. All you have to do is just say yes or no. You don't have to give an explanation. But I like that.
Sean, I got to tell you, that was the most like edge of my seat on what your answer was going to be. I've been in a while. I was like, wait, is he voting it on? Is he voting it off? I don't know.
He said he agreed with you.
Yeah, but it was kind of like, I do agree with Joe about this, but, so I was like, okay, where's it going? Yeah.
Right. And I would say, it's not entirely just a difficulty thing, right? Frustrating is more than just, oh, well, you die, like it's about what happens when you die and how far back you're pushed and what it's like to regain from dying. Like, I think that there's a lot of things from a level design standpoint that Abadox does right. And then if they just would have thought about like, maybe this isn't that kind of game, but if they just would have thought like 3 strikes and you're out, maybe this whole game would be different, right? Like maybe the votes would have been different. I don't know. I can't say that without playing that kind of game, but it's just really hard to say that just because the game is well polished and, and has a lot of flair, it doesn't mean that like, I wouldn't put any game that's considered frustrating on the essential games.
It has problems in the fundamentals.
Yeah, you should just be having a good time when you're playing the essential games list. You should be like, man, these games are just a good time. And I think, Mega Man 2 is a game that people will think is hard, but you're not going to say like, damn, I hate this game. Like, no one's going to do that when they play Mega Man 2, I hope. Right, Joe? No one's going to do that when they play Mega Man 2.
Why me? I never did that.
They might do that when they play...
No one would do that.
Whoa. They might do that when they play our next game of the week, Adventures of Lolo 2. See what I was doing there? Mega Man 2, Adventures of Lolo 2.
This is
because
a less good seg.
Yeah, well, I'm trying here, but Adventures of Lolo 2, as far as I can tell, has nothing to do with planets being swallowed whole by alien parasites. So we're just going to have to, find connections elsewhere. Adventures of Lolo is on the Essential Games list, so you'll have to definitely tune into this one to find out if Adventures of Lolo 2 is on the Essential Games list. I mean, think about it. Mega Man 1 and Mega Man 2 are on the Essential Games list.
You never know.